In today's video, I want to try and help out a dude in need, specifically in need of advice about just what the hell to do because his otherwise perfectly serviceable but aging Ford Ranger 3.2 is losing power, going uphill on an otherwise perfectly serviceable summer's day, towing, of friggin' course, a 3.5 ton aluminium effluent carriage. Who doesn't want that? So the dealer's not being that helpful. I'll try and chime in there. I want to get inside the thought process of the beard stroker to the extent that there ever is a thought process. We might even try and streamline that for the beard strokers among us a little bit. That's audacious, I know. I want to talk about this baby. I got a question about that yesterday. It's my new toy, an ESAB Sentinel A60 welding helmet. And no, this is not a sponsored segment. I dropped the big bucks on one because I always wanted it, and the A60, which is an upgrade from the A50, is just, it ticked every box. The A50 was not quite there, but this one's very nice, so we'll talk about that. And finally, I'm going to address a comment I got yesterday concerning just how demeaning it is for me to read messages from you in a funny voice. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, but Australia only. Website. Code. Okay, so rather hot today. We're having a heat wave. It's hotter than 2 ferrets humping in a mohair sock. Imagine that. Satan couldn't take this heat, frankly. But I'll try and soldier on anyway, shall I? The cicadas, of course, the heat drives them into a hexadecimal communicational frenzy out there, those flesh-eating bastards. So I got this email from Frank, I think it was yesterday. Maybe I was being tardier than usual though, could have been the day before. Anyway, Frank goes, and I'm going to read it in a funny voice because it's funny. I don't think Frank sounds like this. I'm shallow like that. Oh, John, we completed a return trip to Cape York in August following our Crusader caravan. Crusader. With a 2018 Ranger 3.2 XLT. Oh, paradise, here we come. It's an auto dual cab towing in sports mode as per owner's manual, and left it with friends in Cairns to continue on. Most of our driving from Melbourne to Cairns took place prior to midday. This is in August, so not that hot. But on return, this was mixed with some midday to late afternoon trips, and noticed on extended inclines I was losing power. I have to say, Frank punctuates, writes in sentences and paragraphs. That's very rare for the caravaner to communicate in this way. I was losing power on inclines at times to around 70 k's an hour, with no more throttle to give. Flat frickin' knacker. This did not happen on the way there, which also had a fair few extended inclines. Okay, so something's happened, hasn't it? Betwixt being at the tip, so to speak, and back down the shaft a bit. I've since taken the Ranger. He's changed his voice. I have since taken the Ranger back to my local Ford dealer for routine service, where we purchased it from new, mentioned this, and they advised there was nothing wrong with it. There you go. Dealers are often so helpful like that, especially if they're, a bit jammed in the service department. Nah, she's all good, mate. Next. All previous trips were shorter distances round Tasmania, where we travelled for 8 months. Imagine that, 8 months in an aluminium box sharing effluent. It doesn't get much more intimate than that, really, does it? And not once did this occur, even though the terrain in Tassie mostly consists of mountains. Mountains and busted-ass eucalypt forest. That's what Tasmania is. Is this normal in weather 30 degrees C plus, or there could be something else that is not related to temperature? I don't think we've established, Frank, that any of this is related to temperature. There's no logical correlation there. 30 degrees isn't that hot, dude. It's just not. I had a transmission cooler fitted by Wholesale Automatics prior to our trip against staunch opposition from Ford advising against it. We're going to come back to that because this is the beard stroker thought process in play, right? Yeah, fit a transmission cooler even though they say bad idea. We'll get back to that. Our Ranger has not missed a service schedule from new and always on time. Well, 2 thumbs up there, Franco. Well done, son. Half of the people I interact with problems with their cars and they allege they're getting thrown under the bus, they say, I've had it serviced on time, but massively over the distance, or they haven't had it serviced on time. They've done it every 15,000, but they drive, 4,000 Ks a year. So there's that. I had the transmission serviced at 80,000 and 150,000 Ks with Odo reading of 164,870 Ks to date. That's 4 laps of the planet. Not all of which was towing that effluent carriage, but most of it, I assume, by the sound of things. So well done, living the dream. Car drives well, no signs of any malfunctions, yeah, except for being a bit of a gutless shitbox at uphills in the heat, as it were, Ranger has TJM fiberglass canopy, rhino roof rack, and a Hamer front bar with Runva winch and an 80-litre fridge in the tub. Alternatively, you could go to a 5-star resort where they have hotties by the pool and someone will make you a mojito whenever you ask for it. More weight. I don't know why we're going here, but this was an unexpected turn. More weight, 103 kilos, misses 67. Caravan Tear, 2634, ATM 3.5 tonnes with around 300 to 350 kegs added when fully loaded for the 2 of us. This includes drinking water of 90 litres. I am. There we go, not am I. I am second-guessing myself now and thinking Ford might have been correct in advising against adding a transmission cooler, or is it just the towing in heat conditions of 30 degrees C+? For extended periods is the norm. Run some numbers, interested in your opinion. Regards, Frank. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. We'll do that next. My strong advice for you, if you are shopping for Christmas for some salient dude in your life, is lay off the frickin' socks and the undies and the aftershave. We've all got enough of that. We could go without. Dudes love torches. And fortuitously, Olight has a Christmas sale, which wraps up on Tuesday at midnight. So let's not be equivocating for too long. Biggest problem, of course, with Olight is you go to their website, there's 5,000 torches. How do you choose one? Let me make it really simple for you. I carry my aging Warrior Mini 2, and it is awesome because you can use the little barrel switch here to give you a little bit of light work, and you can adjust the levels when you've got plenty of time to make shit happen. But if you really need light in a hurry, it's got a tail switch, boom, and you can see that this has been biffed and dropped and scratched up against my Leatherman endlessly in my pocket, still functional after a couple of years. It's been upgraded. This is the direct upgrade. This is the Warrior Mini 3. It's an awesome torch, same kind of thing, only better. It's got a better tail switch and a better barrel switch, and it's a bit brighter and, just generally nicer. They don't get paid to make them worse, just like car companies when they release a new model. Got to make the new one better. If that's a bit big for the pocket because, skinny jeans or something, then you might consider the Warrior Nano, which is everything the Mini is, only shorter. So that's pretty cool. If there's a likely zombie apocalypse, but, things might change, then the Warrior 3S is like, honey, I just pumped the Mini. And it's got the same switch on the barrel, switch on the tail. It's just a bit bigger and beefier. It's at the absolute upper limit of pocket friendliness. So that's awesome. And of course, if a zombie apocalypse is certain, the recently upgraded Warrior X4 is just great. It's too big for the pocket, so you get this thermoplastic sort of case, which does a great job on retention, but it's easy to deploy. And there's also a hidden USB-C charging port just in there, which is kind of cool. It doesn't affect the waterproof nature of the port, open or closed. It's still waterproof to, I'm going to say, 2 meters and drop tested similarly. It's It's got a nice ring to hang onto with the finger, a stainless steel bezel, so if you need to breach a car window to rescue, I don't know, a kid or a pet trapped in the heat, or help someone in the aftermath of a car crash, you get through a window, no problem. The pro tip there is look for the 90-degree corner at the top of the window of tempered glass, because that's where the residual stresses are poorly resolved, and that's the easiest place to smash the window. So yeah, dude, this is great but bulky, I'd have to say. And if you're more of a vital sales representative or something, then you might consider the Arcfeld Ultra, which is made out of this spooky aluminium alloy that in many ways is kind of tougher than titanium. It is a torch, but it's also a laser pointer and a UV light. So UV light is really good if you want to play doctor in a hotel room or something, but it can also help you find scorpions. So if you're still looking for a Christmas present for, I don't know, ex-wife number 3, for example, then the scorpion detecting power of the Arcfeld Ultra is not to be underestimated. I'll put links to my preferred Olight torches in the description, and just remember the sale wraps up on Tuesday at midnight, so let's not be dilly-dallying, especially as all the good ones typically sell out pretty quickly during the sale. I really think we've got to talk about the thought process first, right? Because we're talking about a fault and evidence and then just gut feeling and guessing. And gut feeling and guessing has its place, but Jesus Christ, there's no direct correlation between the heat and this fault. There's no direct correlation between the transmission cooler that you fitted against Ford's advice and the fault, although it is functionally insane to do something that the manufacturer of a product says don't do, okay? I don't think the transmission is the problem here, because transmission faults don't typically reduce engine power. They just don't. One of the reasons why it's stupid to fit a transmission cooler just because you have a stroke and you think it's a great idea because, oh, it's hot outside, I might need a transmission cooler, right? It doesn't work that way. There's already a transmission cooler. I mean, transmission fluid goes from the transmission to the bottom tank of the radiator and comes back. And it goes in hotter than the bottom tank of the radiator, and it comes back cooler than it went in. And that's what it's designed to do. So what you're talking about is rejecting heat from the oil, and is that manufacturer's system adequate for doing that given the work that you're doing with that vehicle? And if there's no evidence that says the factory setup is inadequate, then why dick with it, dude? Like, come on, work with me here. Whereas, if a whole bunch of transmissions were shitting themselves on the road to Cape York of a particular make and model when operated in a particular way, and we diagnose down and say it's because the oil in the transmission overheats, you need an aftermarket cooler, in that case, fit one. But just thinking it's a good idea, or going to a transmission shop or some other shop where that's what they sell and asking them, is it a good idea? What do you think they're going to say? Like, if you go to some specialist shop, it can be any specialist shop. It can be frickin', I don't know, foreskinbiltong.com.au, and you're there wondering, do I want sweet or salty? And is this really a good idea, kind of thing? And you see Melissa, the chat bot down the bottom, is there anything I can help you with, kind of thing. You say, oh, thanks, Melissa, I'm torn between salty and sweet. She'll say, well, get one of each and see which one you prefer. And I really don't know whether I'll enjoy foreskin biltong at all. My mates down the pub tell me it's awesome and they're great blokes, so I'm willing to give it a try. But what do you think chatbot Melissa is going to say, right? She's going to say, we can sell you 10 on the cheap. There's a discount, free shipping. Use the code AEJC and get 20% off at foreskinbiltong.com.au. Whatever. The point I'm making is that retailers of specialist products, dude, they're generally a little bit biased on the whole is buying one a good idea front, aren't they? So unless there's a distinct problem that you need to solve. Here's another example of modifying your car. If a vehicle comes without a rear diff lock and you really need one because you're going to keep throwing it at the frickin' Widowmaker and endless dunes on the Canning stock route, whatever, then it might be fair enough to fit a rear diff locker, like 2 thumbs up. Good idea, especially if there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that without that, its off-road ability, whatever this vehicle hypothetically is severely constrained, more than you want. In that case, have at it, dude, like modify away. But one of the problems with fitting an aftermarket transmission cooler is that it might be too good, okay? So one of the things about transmission oil is you don't want it to get too cool. You want it to be kind of Goldilocks, not overheated. 150 degrees is probably bad, I guess, but so is like 20, you know? That's why they put it through the bottom tank of the radiator, because that's kind of still warm down there. So it's not going to return too cold. You know what I mean? And if you use a different cooler and for some reason you're driving around Tasmania in winter would be a good example, you might be continuously operating the transmission in oil that is below its optimal operating temperature, which is also a fairly stupid idea, I'd suggest, because, you know, manufacturers do spend a lot of time in R&D putting thermocouples on everything and operating vehicles in extremis and seeing what breaks. And some of them do better than that, do better than others at that. But, you know, just to pretend that you've got a better idea in the absence of data, that is a bad idea. It's a bad way to approach modification. I would also suggest that if you are getting close to the 3.5 tonne ATM and you're towing it with a ute, this is, to me at least, not a good idea. A, because towing 3.5 tonnes places extreme limits on what you can carry in the vehicle. And that would include things like the bull bar, the winch, the roof rack, which I assume has stuff on it, and the 90 litres of water, etc. Whatever you're carrying is part of the GCM. You've got to consider the GCM limit and also the GVM limit of the vehicle. And with 3.5 tonnes on the back, it's really hard to comply, even though your missus is not, self-evidently not a whole lot of rosy material. It's still really hard to comply, dude. The second reason is that 3.5 tonnes worth of van has a lot of inertia, and that means it's got more than enough ability to nudge the vehicle off the road if you're not really careful. And you might be really careful, but shit can still happen, like you can have a blowout. And if that happens, it could end really badly in the way that it might not if you only had 2.5 tonnes out the back kind of thing. I think for most utes, the kind of rational towing limit is 2.5 tonnes. You know what I mean? 2 tonnes would be better. I've towed 2 tonnes a bit with the Triton. That's not fun. You'd only do it if you had to get 2 tonnes of crap from A to B kind of thing. 2.5 tonnes, I really think that's living life on the raggedy edge with a vehicle like a dual cab ute, you know, and you could think I'm being overly conservative, but I'd rather not wake up dead as a result of pursuing my effluent carriage fantasy around Australia. I think the problem here is most likely to be a fuel problem, frankly, because this is telling me that something's limiting that vehicle's performance under load. If it's uphill towing a caravan, then fuel type problems typically manifest themselves in this way. The car can go just fine when it's not working real hard, but then if you impose something hard, effluent carriage, incline, working against gravity, rolling resistance, all of that shit, then I'd be looking at things like the fuel system, and not just having a few beard stroking discussions about it, I'd take the freaking car to a proper mechanic, not necessarily a Ford dealer, because dealers tend to be shit at diagnosis. I'd take it to a specialist at this kind of thing, you know, four-wheel drive utes, and diesels in particular, and I'd get them to give the whole fuel system a bit of a once-over. Like, is everything hunky-dory down there? I'd also maybe look for split intercooler hose, MAF sensor, how's that working, kind of thing, because only two things go into an engine when you think about it. It's only fuel and air, and this is most likely to be a problem with one of those things. And then you need to go and do a bit of a test. You need to find a hill, hook up your effluent carriage, and then go for a drive up it. You know, go for a drive up it on a hot day, cold day, back to back, whatever. You could also plug in a dongle and have a look at the various parameters, like what are the various temperatures and what's the flow rate and stuff like that. And if you know how to interpret that data, it might help you diagnose the problem. But if you don't, if it's all just Greek, then just take it to a mechanic and say, here's the problem, here's what I experienced. The dealer says she's all good, but I was flat knacker and 70 uphill, and it's usually better than that. So can you just give me a health check? That is essentially how I would do that, Frank. But dude, I'd only make changes to my vehicle when there's evidence that they're required. Like, I get that it's fun to tinker with your car, and dual cab utes are the kind of new Holden Monaro, aren't they? You know, like everyone's bolting shit onto them in the way that they were doing that to Monaros and GT Falcons in the 70s kind of thing. But in reality, modification of all vehicles is a balancing act. Like, you think of mods in terms of what it's going to give you, but there's also what's it going to take away. Everything you bolt on is going to reduce what you can carry. Everything, like if you increase the transmission oil cooling capacity by fitting a red hot aftermarket cooler, it might be too good. And on a cold day, the transmission might be compromised because the fluid coming back might be too cold. There needs to be evidence for the modifications, is what I'm saying. And now this from ChrisPack6264, who goes, "G'day John, this is off topic, only is your welding helmet an A40, A50 or A60? It's an A60, dude. I was thinking of getting a 60, only that the viewing area might cop a bit of damage being so big." Interesting thought process there, Chris. Now, I would suggest that it's the only time in my life I've ever heard of a bigger viewing area in a welding helmet being viewed as any kind of disadvantage. I suppose the bigger it is, the more vulnerable it is to scratches and scuffs and getting, you know, blowback all over it, you know, little BBs hitting it and melting it, whatever. But this is a particularly well thought out helmet, right? The reason I bought it, apart from the cool Darth Vader aesthetic, is that it's got the grind button here. You can feel it through the gloves, right? You just press to grind, which is absolutely brilliant. And this big visor thing at the front here, they give you 4 replacements with the helmet. And I assume you can buy others as well, right? So when you buy the helmet, you get these 4 replacement visors. You get 2 gold-coloured ones and 2 clear ones if you don't like the gold tint. And you also get, it's 1 or 2, I can't tell. But you also get the inner plastic screen replaced, right? Replacement, get it right. The other thing I really like about this helmet compared with the 50, like it does have a bigger viewing area than the 50, but there are proper buttons in here in the control panel. I don't know how well you can see that in there. Whereas I think if memory serves, the 50 had like a touch screen, and I don't want to deal with a touch screen inside a welding helmet. The other thing I'd suggest is that, do you really need an expensive welding helmet at all? Kind of depends how keen you are to own one. You don't need one. If you're keen to own one, you might just want one, that's okay. It's like a freaking Dior handbag or something, only a 10th of the price or a 15th of the price. These are, I'm gonna say, less than $500, and they are really good. Like, they feel good, they've got a lot of support, and they just feel right when you put them on. They've got a super wide sort of field of view. And the other thing, I hope the audio's not too shit, but the other thing I really like about this helmet is how it sits down on your chest. So you're not going to flash yourself in the neck with too much UV. And typically when you're welding, you're always looking down. You're not kind of looking straight this way out here. You're always kind of looking down or looking close. And that means you need to see down like that as opposed to straight out like you're watching the footy or something. So this is just super comfortable. They also make a Papa one, which is the forced air, you know, purified air respirator, you know, and a pressure air purifying respirator or something. I forget what it stands for, but there's a battery pack and a fan and a filter and a tube going up your back and into the top. And that's really good if you're welding things that are even more hideous than most welding fumes, such as a lot of galvanised. You can get that metal fume fever from galvanising, which is bad. And there's also some lead in the zinc that they galvanise with. And when the arc hits the galvanising, it creates duos things, dude. It creates zinc oxide and lead oxide. And the lead oxide's really bad for you, like it's linked to brain cancer. Whereas the zinc oxide can cause that allergic reaction called metal fume fever, which can make you feel as sick as a dog. It's really bad for you. So if you're welding something with chrome in it, you've got to be a little bit careful of liberating hexavalent chromium into the air around you. So yeah, the forced air respirator version, not a bad idea. But in here, what I do, okay, is I got a fan just over there, and I just have a gentle draft across this way to carry the fumes away from me, but not enough to interfere with the gas shielding, you know. That's a bit of a Goldilocks kind of blend. I often put a little bit of a baffle just wherever I need to so that I can protect the puddle but still have a main sort of draft carrying the fumes away. That's another pretty good countermeasure. It's also a good idea not to stick your face into the smoke wherever you can, although every welding hood is pretty carefully designed. The primary countermeasure against the fumes is the shape, because they come up around your head as opposed to getting under it. That's the other reason I really like it touching you on the chest, is because it gives you a more effective seal from the fumes. So that's kind of lovely. The other cool thing about these auto darkening helmets, even the cheapies, is that they protect you better than the flip ones from the flash, right? Because every auto darkening helmet blocks the UV and it blocks the infrared. They're already 100% near enough dark to UV and IR, right? So you're not going to cook yourself and you're not going to fry your DNA with the UVC, because they're opaque to that anyway. When they go dark, quote unquote dark, they're just darker to visible light. They're already dark when it comes to UV and IR. So that's pretty clever, but that's all auto darkening helmets. One of the reasons I'm such a fan of them. The clarity with this thing, I've only run a few test beads, but the clarity is awesome. Like, it's really nice to look through. It's not just, the cheap ones are all kind of green, you know, and not that clear, but you're definitely getting what you pay for with that anyway. So just to close off here, I wanted to read you a comment I got from a dude who I won't name, and I won't name them so they can't sue me for defamation, in the remote chance that I might defame them. And I'm just going to read it to you, and I make no imputation in these reports. When I read someone's message in a stupid voice, it's just meant to be funny. I'm not making the imputation that they actually sound like that. I'm just channeling what I'd prefer them to sound like in my head. And in no way am I making any kind of imputation designed to damage someone's reputation. You've got to be kidding. I'm above that, obviously. So, dude without a name goes, "Stop narrating letters from engaging following subscribers, apostrophe S, like we're all yobbos. apostrophe S, JC. It's seriously degrading to myself as a subscriber with less than a pound of your tons, with apostrophe S, with less than a pound of your tons, apostrophe S, of obvious knowledge of physics and engineering. I'll consider myself pretty bloody smart in mechanical and engineering principles, apostrophe S. So you might be smart at that, dude, but punctuation, not so much. Without a chance of mathematical neurological connection to gods, apostrophe S, like yourself. But I want to understand as much of your content as I can without, in all caps, being put down with a hyphen as a dumb CAN apostrophe T with 3 or 4 exclamation marks. Here's the thing, dude. If you write a comment on one of my videos, if you send me a frickin' email, then unless you say, do not publish my name, please, then you got to expect, because you know what I do, right? I'm a frickin' journalist. If you write to a journalist, you might expect, just putting it out there, what you write to appear in the publication subsequently. Mightn't you? I actually do respect people's wishes not to have their name published if they say, please don't publish my name, although, even in that case, it interferes with the credibility, doesn't it? Because if you make these allegations, oh, I've had this car and those bastards are throwing me under the bus, please don't use my name. If you're not willing to stand behind what you claim is true, then I can't just say sort of some dude said this sucks. You really have to have the courage of your convictions to have your name appended to your allegations. That's just how this works. Now, I actually find it hilarious internally to read people's messages out in that voice. And the reason I find it hilarious is that when I was a host on Radio 2UE, they chucked me into midnight to dawn at the weekends. And you can imagine the calibre of humanity that would ring up at that time. 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone else is having a perfectly serviceable sleep except the insomniac crazies, right? And these people would ring up and they'd, oh, g'day, John. Oh, I love your show. Long time listener, first time caller, kind of thing. And they wouldn't be bunging it on. It was a revelation to me that people like this actually existed. So when I read people's messages in those voices, it's because I've spoken to those people and they are part of the fabric of our society, whether you like it or not, you know? And they put an apostrophe after every S. It's meant to just be a plural because the education system failed them. I don't blame them. They just exist. They vote. One of them might marry your daughter one day. You know, she might say yes. She might say, I do, just to get back at mommy and daddy for making her, you know, finish university and get that law degree. They're funny like that, you know. But anyway, I don't see how reading someone's message out in a funny voice demeans someone, especially if all they're doing is watching the video with that read in it. I really don't get that. I find it absolutely amazing that somebody could be so worked up about something of that nature to write me this indignant message that presumably he thinks this is demeaning. Like, the grievance industry, the outrage culture that we have as part of the fabric of our society at the moment has to stop. Nobody gives a fuck if you're offended. Nobody gives a fuck if I'm offended. Being offended is something that you just need to let wash over you. You can't fight it. It's like being in the ocean when there's big waves crashing into you. You have to get under them and just let them go over the top. You can't fight it, dude. Someone's going to say something or do something that you don't like. And if that's the case, then try and change their point of view, or, disengage from them and deal with people who don't offend you, whatever. That's an option, I suppose. But some people, they're just not happy, are they? Unless they're flat out offended. But if you don't mind, I will not refrain from reading out the missives from the great unwashed in the stupidest voices that I can concoct, and I make no imputation that they actually sound like that. It's just hilarious to reflect on our culture in that way.